few days later, Fiorentina had to drive to Rome, where her health would be checked. Back then, every Italian who wanted to travel to America had to pass those tests at the Embassy of the United States. My parents had allowed me to accompany Fiorentina along with my grandparent. I was waiting in front of the blue Mustang that my grandpa used to drive when I heard a voice behind me. "Hey, kid." I looked around, and it was Emilio. "Hi," I said. He hooked his thumbs in his pockets and faced the ground when he asked, "How's Fiorentina?" "She won't talk to me." "To tell the truth, she's miserable." He nodded. "Me too." He raised his head, and I noticed that there were tears in his eyes. I had never seen a grown man cry until then. I ran to him and hugged him tight. He was sobbing and didn't even try to hold it back. I found it strange that a boy like Emilio didn't seem to be ashamed of his feelings, and this made me respect him more than ever before. "I'm sorry, kid. I know you're going to miss her too," Emilio said and stroked my hair gently. This was the first time I actually realized that Fiorentina wasn't just going to leave Emilio, but me too. I started to shake, and within a few seconds, tears were running down my cheeks. I would lose my aunt, my best friend, my everything. How would I survive all these lonely hours, the fights with my mother, or just the gray everyday life in this boring town? The thought of her being genuinely happy in Argentina could have kept me alive, but I knew that she wouldn't be. "Are you okay?" Emilio asked worriedly. "Don't touch her!" Grandpa, who had appeared in the doorframe, said loudly. "I'm sorry, sir," Emilio said and stepped back. "Get off my property!" Grandpa shouted. I was paralyzed. "Tell her that I will always love her," Emilio said and left. Fiorentina and Grandma came out of the house, but Emilio was already gone. "Okay, everybody get in the car. We have to go," my grandfather said. We did as he said and left for Rome. I had never been to a city other than Venosa, so I got quite excited when we got there. The buildings were higher than those in our hometown, and the streets were packed with cars and people. The throbbing of car engines and horns pleased me. I tried to count all the gelaterias we passed by, but there were too many. Palm trees next to the street provided shade to the countless pedestrians, and I could see the Colosseum from afar. Fiorentina didn't seem to take note of the amazing view. The whole drive, tears were silently rolling down her face. I was holding her hand, but I felt useless, because there was nothing I could do to help her. The embassy was a large building, guarded by 3 security guards, and a bunch of American flags were waving in the wind. My grandparents told them why we were here. They opened the iron gate and let us pass. Inside the embassy, it was dark, and the walls were filled with diplomas and photos of important people I had never heard of. Fiorentina was immediately sent to do the medical check, while my grandparents had to fill in some documents for her departure. But Fiorentina refused to go in alone, and asked the doctor, a ginger-haired man in his 40s, if I could accompany her. He nodded. We entered a small room. The walls, the chairs, and the lights were white, and that instantly made me feel comfortable. "Sit down, please," the doctor said. His voice was deep and soothing. Fiorentina sat down on the examination chair, and I moved a normal chair next to her, to be able to hold her hand. "My name is Dr. Marino," the doctor said. "First, we'll have to fill in the form. Your name, please?" "Fiorentina Potenza." Her voice was shaken, and he glanced at her. She put on a fake smile, and he continued with the questions. She was trying so hard to hold it together. "If you have together life room, then at least with class." Her pride was way too big. He asked Fiorentina to get undressed and examined her from bottom to top. When he was done with several tests, he smiled at us. "Miss Potenza, I'm glad to tell you that your health condition seems to be perfect so far. You get the final results per mail within some days, and then there's nothing holding you back in Italy anymore." Fiorentina's eyes sparkled with tears. She tried to speak, but only a sob came out. "Did I say something wrong?" Dr. Marino asked, confused. Neither of us answered. "Miss, are you all right?" he asked, and put a hand on her shoulder. Fiorentina was suddenly shaken by sobs, but she said, "No, everything's fine." I rolled my eyes. I had had enough. "Stop crying. Just tell him," I said loudly. Fiorentina shook her head. "Stella, I can't dishonor my family." "Corinthians 16:30, I said. Suddenly she stopped crying. Be on your guard, stand firm in the faith. Be courageous, be strong. Dr. Marina quoted and smiled dreamily. Fiorentina looked at me. You're right, Stella, she said, took a deep breath, and looked at him. I don't want to leave, she said softly. Pardon me? Dr. Marina asked. I don't want to leave Italy, she repeated with a steady voice. My parents forced me to marry a man I neither know nor love. Fiorentina explained, and I finally recognized my fiery aunt. I have to move to Argentina to live there with him, but I love another man. I'm very sorry, the doctor said, frowning. That's horrible. Have you tried talking to your parents? Dr. Marina asked. Yes, but they don't care about my opinion, Fiorentina said. Isn't there anything you could do, doctor? Dr. Marina shook his head. I'm afraid there isn't, miss. But you could. I know what you want to say, miss, but that would be criminal offense. I can't take this risk. Fiorentina buried her head in her hands in desperation. I'm undone. I hugged her. Dr. Marina offered his tissues, and I tried to calm down the now enraged Fiorentina, while he read the certificate he just completed over and over again. After some time, he said that it was time to go. When we left the room, the doctor held her back. What's his name? He asked. Emilio. How gentle she said his name, as if it could break between her lips. I felt like Dr. Marina knows this too. He closed his eyes for a second and then said, everything will turn out all right. We sat down on some hard chairs next to the room to wait for my grandparents. Fiorentina didn't cry. She was just staring into space. Her eyes didn't sparkle anymore. They were hard and lifeless. I had never felt sadder in my whole life. The letter is here, Grandma said as me and Fiorentina were watching TV in their living room a couple of days later. Amazing, Fiorentina said sarcastically. My grandmother opened the letter and read it. Her smile slowly disappeared. But how is this possible? She exclaimed bewilderedly. What's wrong? Grandpa asked and turned off the TV. It's written that Fiorentina is declared unsuitable. Her health condition is bad and therefore she can't travel to America. I can't believe this. Fiorentina is very healthy, my grandfather said and snatched the letter out of Grandma's hand. Fiorentina and I looked at each other. We both thought the same thing. Love never failed. God's grace had saved her. I smiled and Fiorentina said excitedly, Emilio! I've got to tell him! She turned around and ran outside. Fiorentina, come back, it's raining! My grandmother yelled. Get her back, she told me, and I ran after Fiorentina, but not to get her back. It wasn't just raining, it was pouring. Within split seconds, I was soaking wet. It was a typical summer thunderstorm. I slipped on the paved stones when I saw lightning cut across the sky and fell, but I quickly got back up. When I arrived at Emilio's house, Fiorentina was already knocking on his door like crazy. Emilio! Open the door! She shouted. The door opened and Emilio seemed very surprised. What are you doing? You're going to catch a cold, he said. I don't care, Fiorentina said, laughing. All I care about is you. She took his hand and he stepped out in the rain too. What happened? He asked. I'm not going to go to America, Emilio. I'm staying here. With you, she declared while the rain was dropping from her face. Emilio was speechless for a second, and Fiorentina let go of his hand. Her smile faded. I mean, only if you still want to be with me, she said, hesitatingly. He put his arms around her and lifted her up. Of course I do, he said joyfully. Fiorentina laughed as he spun her around. A thunder roll made me wince. When Emilio noticed me looking at them, he put her down and held out his hand. Come join us, kid. Without hesitation, I jumped into his arms, and we stood there hugging until the rain stopped. The two got married a few months later, and I got asked to be their flower girl. A smile fits across my face as I think of the pretty pink dress that Fiorentina made for me. I'm pretty sure I still have it somewhere in the attic. The words the pastor said back then echo in my head. Till death do you part? A lonely tear runs down my cheek. Death had already parted them, has already parted them, when Emilio died 2 years ago. Now Fiorentina's gone too, and how will I survive without her? I close my eyes and take a deep breath. The thought of her being genuinely happy in heaven, finally reunited with the love of her life, will keep me alive.